Kansas Territory, June 1873. The wind kicked up dust along the edge of Dry Creek, carrying with it the sharp scent of sun-baked earth and the rustle of stolen movement. Aiden Forrester reined in his gelding just outside the edge of the abandoned Homestead garden, his hand settling on the butt of his colt as he narrowed his eyes. Something or someone was rustling around the carrot rows. He dismounted quietly, boots crunching dry grass. The sun was low, casting long shadows, and the ridge behind him glowed orange. He stepped forward, slow and soundless, until he saw her. A girl, no, a woman crouched low in a faded calico dress, her hair a tangled mess the color of dark honey. She held 3 carrots in one arm, her free hand reaching for a fourth. Aiden cleared his throat. She jumped, whirling around. Her face was smudged with dirt, cheeks hollow, eyes wide. She held the carrots like they were gold. "I was not gonna take more," she said fast. He has not eaten in days." Aiden blinked. "Who?" She stepped aside, and there behind her was a skinny chestnut gelding, ribs showing, his head low and eyes dull. The woman moved to him, holding out a carrot. He took it slow, chewing like it hurt. Aiden lowered his hand from his gun. "You stealing to feed that horse," she nodded. "He is all I have." Aiden looked at the horse, then back to her. "What is your name?" Della Trenton." He tilted his head. "Well, Della Trenton, you picked the wrong garden. This belongs to me." She looked away, bracing for the worst. "But I reckon he looks worse off than I am," he finished. "You and him come with me," she blinked. "What? I have a barn, I have oats, you can feed him proper, and you can stop stealing." Della hesitated. "Why would you help me?" Aiden shrugged. "You said it yourself." "He has not eaten in days." She looked at him for a long beat, then gave a single nod and followed. Aiden led them back to his small homestead, just a cabin, a corral, and a wide stretch of open sky. He watched her from the corner of his eye as she walked, one hand brushing the horse's neck. She was limping slightly. Her shoes were nearly worn through. Inside the barn, he filled a trough with oats. The horse dove in. "He has not had grain in. I do not even know how long," Della whispered. Aiden leaned on the post. "Yours was my father's. When he passed, they tried to take everything. I ran." "Who's they?" She looked down. "My uncle. He said I owed him for feeding me after my father died, said he'd sell the horse and send me to work in town." Aiden's jaw tightened. "You ran far," she nodded. "Been walking 4 days. Slept in a dry riverbed. I thought I could get him something here. I did not think anyone would see." He let out a breath. "You can stay in the loft tonight. It is warm and dry." Della looked at him, unsure. "Why are you being kind?" "I was hungry once," he said simply. "I remember what it feels like." That night, Aiden brought her a blanket and a plate of beans and cornbread. She thanked him quietly and ate slow, chewing with care like she was not sure it would stay. He stayed in the barn a while, brushing down the horse, whose name, he learned, was Ash. Della sat nearby, silent, watching. "He is all I have left," she said softly. Aiden looked at her through the dim lamplight. "That is not true anymore." She turned quickly, meeting his eyes. Something passed between them, something quiet but real. She looked away first, but not before he saw it. In the morning, she was still there. He found her feeding Ash the rest of the oats, humming low under her breath. She paused when she saw him, but he just nodded. "You can stay," Aiden said. "I do not have money, not asking for it. There are chores, you help, you eat." "You and the horse," her eyes softened. "Thank you." Weeks passed. Della worked beside him, mending the fence, hauling water, cooking when she could. She was quiet but steady. Sometimes Aiden caught her smiling when she thought no one saw. Ash gained weight, his coat brightening. Aiden built a small shelter for him beside the barn. One evening after supper, Aiden handed her a small parcel wrapped in cloth. "What is this?" she asked. He shrugged. "Something I found in town, thought you might like it." She opened it slowly. Inside was a pair of sturdy leather boots. "I noticed yours were near falling apart," he said. She stared at them, then up at him. Her eyes were wet. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." But she stepped forward and hugged him, sudden and tight. He stood still, surprised, then slowly wrapped his arms around her back, her head pressed against his chest. "I feel safe here," she whispered. For the first time in so long, he rested his chin on her hair. "You are." That night, she did not go up to the loft. She stayed by the hearth, sitting close. They did not say much. They did not need to by the firelight. She looked at him, really looked. Why are you alone, Aiden? He hesitated. Lost someone, a long time ago, hard to let anyone back in after that. She nodded. I know that feeling. Their eyes met again. This time, neither looked away. I am not running anymore, she said. He reached for her hand. Then stay. She smiled, small and real. I want to, and he smiled back. The morning air carried the scent of dew-soaked hay and wood smoke. From the coals, Aiden stirred back to life. Della stood barefoot by the water pump, sleeves rolled to her elbows, washing yesterday's dust from her arms. The quiet between them had grown companionable, the kind that didn't lean on words to hold its shape. She dried her hands on her skirt and glanced toward the horizon. I'd like to ride him today, just to see if he's still got sense enough to stretch his legs. Aiden tipped his hat back. He's looking steadier. You sure he's ready? He's watching the pasture like he remembers what it's for. They saddled Ash together. Della worked slow, checking the cinch twice, running her hand along his shoulder like she was asking permission. Aiden didn't interfere. She knew the horse better than he ever would. When she swung up, she winced stiff from weeks of walking, but she settled into the saddle like it was something her body still remembered how to do. Take it easy, Aiden called as she nudged Ash forward toward the open field. She didn't answer, just raised 2 fingers over her shoulder. He watched from the fence line, arms folded, as the gelding eased into a trot. The rhythm was uneven at first, but Della adjusted, coaxing him forward with soft clicks and gentle pressure. Aiden could see the old bond between them flickering back to life. She leaned in low, whispering something he couldn't hear, and Ash picked up a lope, tail flicking, ears forward. When she circled back, her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright in a way he hadn't seen. Not since she'd arrived. He remembers, she said breathlessly, sliding down. He's tired, but he remembers. Aiden nodded. So do you. She looked at him sideways. I thought I'd forgot. They walked back together, leading Ash by the reins. The wind had shifted, blowing in from the west, heavy with the smell of rain and river mud. He watched her braid her hair in the barn later, fingers nimble, eyes distant. You ever think about heading back east? She tied off the braid and leaned into the stall door. There's nothing waiting for me there, just people who see me as a burden or a debt to collect. You could file a claim, he said. Land's opening up west of here, government's giving parcels to anyone who'll work 'em. She turned. You think I'd be safe out there by myself, not by yourself, he said, tone steady. Not if you had someone to run it with, she studied him. You offering, he didn't flinch. I'm not much for talking things I don't mean. Della came closer, her steps slow. You don't even know if I can keep up with that kind of life. You just rode a half-starved horse across open ground and brought him back sound. I reckon you can handle more than most. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze held his until something softened at the edges. You think we could build something out there? She asked. I think we already started. That night she set 2 plates on the table instead of 1. He poured her coffee without asking. They ate without hurry, the silence filled with the rasp of forks and the low creak of wind through the walls. When she reached for his hand, he didn't look surprised. I don't want to be alone anymore, she said. You're not, he answered, and she wasn't. Not anymore. The rains came late that summer, heavy and sudden, flattening the brittle grass and filling the creek bed behind the house. Aiden patched the roof with tarred canvas, while Della stood ankle-deep in muddy water, guiding Ash to higher ground behind the barn. They worked without needing to speak, soaked through but steady, their movements practiced and sure. When the weather cleared, the land softened. Aiden turned the ground behind the cabin with a borrowed plow, the sod thick and stubborn. Della followed behind, dropping seed where he had carved deep furrows, her hands red and raw by evening. Neither complained. The days came and went on the rhythm of the work. One Sunday, with the sun high and the chores done early, Aiden hitched the wagon and asked her if she wanted to go into town. Della brushed her hands on her apron. I haven't set foot in a place full of strangers since my father passed. Aiden reached for the reins. You wouldn't be alone. She didn't answer right away, but she stepped up beside him and took the seat. The town of Buckridge was little more than a dry goods store, livery, and a church that doubled as a meeting hall. Children played in the dust outside the mercantile, and someone was frying something that smelled like salt pork down the alley behind the jailhouse. Della kept her chin high, eyes scanning faces but not lingering. Aiden walked beside her, one hand resting lightly at her back. Not pushing, just present. Inside the store, Della paused at a shelf lined with spools of thread and cloth bolts stacked in faded colors. She ran her fingers over a length of blue calico, the fabric thin but soft. Aiden handed the shopkeeper a few coins. "Wrap it." Della turned to him, eyebrows raised. "That wasn't on the list," he shrugged. "Figure you've earned something for yourself." She carried the bundle out like it was something breakable. Later, on the wagon ride home, she watched the open fields roll past, her voice low but certain. "There was a time I thought kindness always came with something attached," she said. "A price or a favor owed." Aiden kept his eyes forward. "That's not how it ought to work." "It's not," she agreed. "But it's how it did. Before." He didn't press her, just handed her the reins. She took them with a small nod, hands steady. That evening, Della cut the blue cloth into panels by lamplight, her brow furrowed in thought. Aiden carved fence posts out back, the smell of cedar thick in the air. She joined him just before dusk, wiping her hands on a rag. "I want to build something that lasts," she said. "Something that doesn't vanish soon as someone stronger comes along." He drove a post into the ground with a mallet, then looked up at her. "Then we'll build it slow and right." She stepped closer, brushing a curl from her cheek. "You never asked me to stay outright." He leaned against the fence rail. "Didn't figure I had to." "You didn't," she said quietly. He reached for her hand, rough palm closing around her fingers. "I don't make promises easy." "I don't need easy," she said. "Just honest." The wind shifted, cool and dry, carrying the scent of earth and pine from the north. They stood there until the last light faded, hands joined, the silence full of something new and unspoken but understood. Inside, she took down the single tin cup from the shelf and poured water for them both, laying it between them on the table. One cup, two hands, neither of them spoke of the future in grand words. But in the way she folded her sewing and set it by the hearth, in the way he stacked the firewood just a little higher than needed, both of them had already made room for it. The first frost came early that year, silvering the field before the wheat had time to root deep. Aiden ran a gloved hand along the ground at dawn, soil firm beneath his palm, breath ghosting in the air. He stood slowly, stretching his back, and glanced toward the cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, Della was awake. She'd begun waking before him these past few weeks. Quietly, without stirring the floorboards. He'd come in from the pasture to find coffee already steeped or a pot of lentils warming on the stove. She never said when she started rising early. He never asked. It didn't feel like something they needed to name. That morning, she met him at the door with a folded scrap of paper in her hand. "This came with the flour sack," she said. "Driver asked for you, said he'd wait if you wanted to send a reply." Aiden took it, eyes scanning the tidy handwriting. He read it twice, lips pressed together, then folded it and slid it into his vest. "Something wrong?" Della asked. He shook his head once. "Neighbor out west of town, Henry Phelps. His wife passed last spring. He's asking if I'll help him finish the new roof before snowfall hits." She studied him. "You'll go tomorrow. Won't be more than 3 days." Her mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. He reached up, brushing a bit of hay from her shoulder. "You'll manage here." She gave a small nod. "I'll keep the stove warm." He packed light that evening: 2 shirts, a wool blanket, and a sack of biscuit and salt pork. Della handed him a tin of lard and a wrapped wedge of dried apple. He tucked them into his satchel without comment. That night they lay on the hayloft floor, the lantern turned low. Ash shifted in the stall below, hooves scraping once before settling. Della lay curled against Aiden's side, her hand resting above his heartbeat. "You ever think about the land past the mountains?" she asked softly. "Some," he said, "but I like it here. Even with the wind, even with the wind." She was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think I'd have to keep moving, that if I stopped too long, someone would come looking." Aiden turned his head, meeting her eyes in the dim light. "You think that now?" "No," she said. "Not anymore." He left at first light. Della watched from the porch, shawl wrapped tight across her shoulders, until he disappeared down the trail. Then she turned, walked back inside, and began her day. The days without him stretched longer than she expected. She hauled water, split kindling, and patched a tear in the barn roof where wind had peeled the canvas back. At night, she lit the lantern, though there was no one to read by it, and sat by the window embroidering small red flowers along the hem of the blue calico he'd bought her. On the third afternoon, she heard hooves on the road. She stepped out, heart thudding, and saw his figure cresting the ridge. He looked tired dust on his boots, sleeves rolled, face drawn, but he sat tall in the saddle. When he dismounted, she took the reins from his hand and walked the horse to the trough without speaking. He followed her, slow. "You patched the barn?" he asked. "I did." "You used the cedar boards. They were all I could lift." He nodded. "Good work." That night, he brought a small cedar box from his satchel, wrapped in oilcloth. He set it on the table beside her plate. "What's this?" "Something from Phelps' wife's sewing chest. He said she wouldn't need it now." She opened it slowly. Inside, a wooden-handled awl, a bone thread shuttle, and several spools of dyed linen thread still wound tight. Della ran her fingers over the tools like they were relics. "I can make things with these," she said. "I know." She looked up, eyes shining without a trace of tears. "You think we'll stay here for good?" Aiden leaned back in his chair. "Unless you want to go," she shook her head. "I stopped running the day you found me in that garden." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then we build here, whatever comes." She didn't answer with words. Just stood, stepped into his arms, and rested her cheek against him, quiet and sure. Outside, the wind had changed again, colder now, but the fire in the hearth burned steady. Inside their small home, nothing felt uncertain anymore. They had chosen each other not out of rescue, not from need, but from the quiet, deliberate knowledge that what they had was real. And they would keep choosing each other, day after day, for all the ones ahead. Winter settled in slow, not with blizzards, but with a hush across the land. The creek froze in a long silver ribbon. The wheat that had taken root before the frost stood low but alive, its green blades curled under the weight of cold. Aiden added another layer of chinking between the cabin logs, while Della stitched wool batting into a quilt made from salvaged scraps. Neither spoke of the cold like it was a hardship. It was a season, and they were ready. One morning near the end of January, Della stepped outside with the milk pail and paused, her eyes lifting toward the hill that bordered the north edge of the property. A single rider approached, bundled in a long coat, a red scarf trailing behind. She narrowed her eyes and waited. Aiden came out beside her without a word, rifle balanced across his arm. The rider stopped well back from the cabin, dismounted, and held up both hands. "Name's Tobias Hart." "I'm looking for a young woman named Della Trenton." Della stepped forward, heart thudding. "Why?" Tobias removed his hat. "I came from St. Clair County. Your uncle passed last fall. He left no heirs." She blinked. "Why would that matter to me?" "There's a claim in your father's name. Farmstead east of the old river bend. Your uncle never filed it proper. It defaults to you now." Aiden didn't lower the rifle, but Della stepped closer. "What condition's it in?" she asked. "House is near gone. Fields are wild, but the land's yours. If you want it." She stared past him toward the frozen line of the creek. "I don't," she said. Tobias hesitated. "You could lease it out or sell. Some folks would offer good money for that stretch." Della looked at Aiden. "Do we need money?" He shook his head. "We're doing fine." She turned back to Tobias. "Then I've no use for it. Let the land rest. My father would have wanted that." Tobias nodded once. "I'll mark it down." He rode off without pressing further. Della stood still a while longer, then handed the milk pail to Aiden and went inside. That night, she pulled the old ledger from the shelf and sat at the table, dipping her pen in ink. Aiden watched from the hearth, boots unlaced, eyes quiet. "What are you writing?" he asked. "Starting a new page," she said. "We've kept track of feed and seed and fence materials, but not much else." He came to sit beside her. "I want to keep a record of what we build," she said. "Not just what we spend." He looked at the page. She'd written the date, and beneath it, "Today, the land where I was born no longer holds me." He placed his hand over hers. "You sure you're at peace with that?" She leaned into him. "I'm sure. Spring came late, but it came." Buds pushed up from the black earth, and the wheat straightened with each warm day. Aiden dug new irrigation channels with a borrowed spade, while Della planted beans beside the porch. They built a new chicken coop together, arguing over where to place the door until both were laughing too hard to finish the job. By early May, the cabin felt fuller, though nothing had changed in size. Aiden added a shelf to the wall above the hearth, where Della placed her cedar sewing box. He carved a small wooden frame and hung it by the window. Inside was a pressed wildflower she'd gathered the day the snow melted. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cottonwoods, Aiden stepped onto the porch and found Della sitting with a basket of mending beside her. She looked up, hair lit gold in the fading light. He knelt in front of her and took her hand. She tilted her head. "There's a preacher riding circuit," he said. "He'll pass through town in 3 weeks' time. I'd like for him to stop here." Her eyes shone, but she didn't cry. She just nodded once, clear and sure. "I will marry you," she said, "and I'll be proud to carry your name." They wed under the cottonwoods, with Ash standing quiet behind them and half the town in attendance. Della wore the blue calico dress she'd sewn herself, with the red flowered hem just brushing her boots. Aiden shaved for the first time in months, and his hands didn't tremble when he held hers. The preacher spoke plain words. When it ended, Della leaned close and said, "Home never felt like a place before, just a thing I was always trying to find." Aiden kissed her then, slow and sure, with the breeze tugging at her braid and the wheat fields swaying behind them. Years passed. The cabin grew. Aiden added a second room, and Della planted lilac by the window. They raised chickens, then goats, then a milk cow with a crooked horn. The wheat harvest came in strong most years. The land gave back what they gave it. Children came, one at a time, with Aiden's eyes and Della's quiet steadiness. The eldest learned to ride Ash before the gelding passed in his sleep one summer night, buried behind the barn with a smooth stone marking the spot. Evenings were spent by the fire, Della's stitching in her lap, Aiden carving toys or sharpening tools. They rarely spoke of the past. They didn't need to. It lived quiet and settled in the corners of their home, not haunting, just reminding. They grew old not all at once, but slowly, the way winter creeps down from the mountains. And still, each morning, Aiden poured 2 cups of coffee. Still, Della folded his shirts with care. Still, they walked the fence line together, hands brushing, steps matched. They had no need for more than what they built. And what they built never left them. They were home. Together. Always.